Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about the 44 rules for playing D&D. All right, so first of all, let's talk about what this is. So this is a big deal. This really blew up on Twitter. Wait a second, Scott. This blew up on Reddit. Nothing blows up on Reddit. Reddit sucks. Okay, so generally, I got some content on Reddit. You can see my stuff below, right? But I really kind of disenchanted with Reddit. My take is Facebook is where most of your friends are. Reddit is where your mean friends are, and Twitter is where your smart friends are. That's the whole of it. That's the whole of it, baby. Like that's it, right? And so I think that's kind of interesting. But I think this blew up. Like this happened on Reddit. I don't think anybody cared. No, I don't think a lot of people are on Reddit actually. Um, and the ones that are just they're mean. Like Reddit is just for mean people. I overall, in my humble opinion. I wish there was something that was better for long form like that, like Reddit, but Twitter is banging. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube. Those are my chosen social medias. And I would like to be on more social medias, but I just don't have the time. I just don't. And the reason why I don't want to just slap another one on there is, on the ones I'm on, I engage. I actually use them, right? Like, and when somebody comments on it, I can, give engagement. I can do something real, right? I just don't have bandwidth for another one. So, but this thing blew up on Twitter. Okay, now why we're talking about today is it then blew up on YouTube's, right? And everybody covered it. Professor Dungeon Master covered it. Bob World Builder covered it. XP to level 3 covered it. A lot of people genuinely covered this thing in detail. So first of all, what is it? So what are the 44 rules to play D&D? So this is a I don't. Some people said it was a manifesto. I think the word manifesto is ruined. It just means, some cranky person has a bunch of bad opinions. I don't think this was a manifesto. This was a genuine attempt to communicate to his own group, right? This dungeon master. This was a genuine attempt by this dungeon master to communicate with his own group. And one of the people in that group, who I think are pretty terrible people generally, um, yeah, I think that's part of this. That is very much part of this. Is this guy sent a real open letter to his group, and said, "Hey, I'm struggling, man, because you guys are not really interacting with my campaign in a way that's winsome, right? And because of that, I need to set these rules, right?" So this is an open letter to his dragon masters, to get things straight and get things back on the good path, right? And then one of his dragon masters betrayed him and took this public and was like, "Look, everybody, this bad DM I have, put out this bad open letter, so let me just share it with the world," right? And I think that's not cool, right? Like, I just think that's really not cool. Um, I would, and actually, is that correct? Is that cool or not? I don't know, because we do own what happens at the table. Every single person has. Now, one thing I think is, if you know that this is going to be received poorly, and then they attach that person's name to it, but I don't know if this person is public. If they actually kept the identity of the dungeon master secret, then I think this is fine. All right. But here's what I want you to understand. Okay. The 44 rules for playing Dungeons and Dragons, it's a good thing that they exist. And the reason why is, I think this points to a very powerful thing that we need to remember about Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons is really interesting in that every other OSR and indie game, they forget the face of Dungeons, and they forget the face of Gary Gygax. And Gary built Dungeons and Dragons, and every other tabletop role playing game that has come before, they all do this two-step that is deadly. It's fatal to a tabletop role playing game community. It's fatal, right? And it's like, "Oh, well, if you have these terrible people at your table, you need to get new players. You need to get and if you have a bad dungeon master, you need to get a new dungeon master." It is the worst advice there is, and Gary ignored it. he built Dungeons and Dragons to be played by terrible players and by terrible dungeon masters. And get this, playing Dungeons and Dragons with the worst dungeon masters, playing Dungeons and Dragons with the best, playing Dungeons and Dragons with the worst dungeon master, playing Dungeons and Dragons with the absolute bog standard worst dragon masters, the utter worst, is still better than spending 1 minute on a video game. And frankly, still better than doing anything else, any other secular activity. It's better than any other secular activity. And so I felt, you know what? In all those videos, none of those people actually called out the real identity of the dungeon master. And if you're going to try to embarrass somebody, I don't think you should be using their real name unless they're a public figure. And this person was not a public figure. You step into the limelight, and then you can go hard at their content. And that's the other thing is, Professor Dungeon Master, XP to level 3. Oh no, that's not right. XP to level 3 did say some really terrible things about the person, the Dungeon Master themselves. That's fascinating. Yeah, XP to level 3 said some horrible things about the Dungeon Master, which was completely inappropriate. Bob Worldbuilder did not. He's one of the nicest guys in the world. I think he's wrong about everything about Dungeons & Dragons, and I think he despises Dungeons & Dragons, but I think he's generally a kind-hearted, good person. Professor Dungeon Master, same thing. Very kind-hearted, good person. I really like his content. I disagree with him on virtually everything, and I also think he really does not like D&D, right? But I think he hates that D&D is the king of all tabletop role-playing games, and I know Bob Worldbuilder hates that D&D is the king of all tabletop role-playing games, in my humble opinion. So, but the point is, this guy was a distraught dungeon master, but it's very important, right? Dungeons & Dragons was built to be run by the worst dungeon masters and run by the worst dragon masters. And this is one lesson that comes from the 44 D&D, the 44 rules of D&D. Here's one lesson, and this is important, okay? All right, here we go. I'm going to give it to you. All right. Anyone who says, go find a different dragon master, go find a different Dungeons & Dragons player, anyone who says, go find a different dungeon master, fool to the core. Fool to the utter core. Misses the entire point of Dungeons & Dragons, right? The entire point is that we meet people in these terrible spots where they don't know, they don't have, they are not perfect. And Dungeons & Dragons can help them learn, help them grow, help them improve, and help them transform into bigger, better, broader, more dynamic, more dramatic people. And I detest this repugnant advice of exile this person from your table. It's horrible and it's bad, and every time you hear it, that person is a monstrous human who has no sympathy and should, in my opinion, not be listened to. Anyone who tells you the solution is to go find a different dragon master, go find a bit different dungeon master, has forgotten the face of Gary Gygax. They know nothing. They know nothing of significance to teach you on Dungeons & Dragons or life, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard was my humble opinion. The important part is when I can hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.